Good morning, good afternoon and good evening everybody. Thanks for taking another look. This time around it's a 1983 Porsche 935. So I do have several of these Porsches to go at across a different range, 935s, 934s, 11s, 959s, you know, there's lots and lots and lots to go at. Now, I have always had a hankering after tin tops and rally cars, and Porsche for me as a supercar fits that a little bit better than any other brands. I'm not that fond of Ferraris, not that fond of Lambos, but I wanted to do this particular car because I quite like the silhouette style races of the big flared arches and the bespoke tubulous chassis that they made. So this era, along with sort of the Zaxby Capri era, I absolutely loved during the 70s. So this particular car, there was a Corgi version I was going to have a crack at, but I actually quite prefer the proportions of the Matchbox version. Plus I've got a few other different variants that I've had as a kid. I think there was a Cadbury's Buttons one somewhere in my box. There's a better version of this one actually, so at the end I will compare that to what I'm going to come up with in this particular video. But for now, this 953, I think the rest of them can go to one side. I've got lots of other ideas for them, for the Valents and the Jägermeisters and all the rest of it, so let's get cracking with this one. Now I've already done a video on removing paint, so if you want to take a look at that, there'll be a link in the description. But underneath, as always, this is the bit I like, typical of Matchbox of this era, fairly basic, although this one has got a steering wheel, which I'm thankful at. Lovely little spring steel suspension on it, makes the wheels really easy to get out there. But this time the chassis is, I didn't realise at the time, split, but no bad deal. I need no excuses for making my own chassis, so that's okay. We'll chuck that to one side for now. We'll have a quick look at the overall condition of this car now I've taken the paint off it, and other than a few little scratches here and there, is fairly good. There's a lot of seams on there from the castings when it was made, which I'll get to, but there's a lot of infills on this which I can open up on the sides, on the front, on the rear. But overall, like I always keep saying, and people laugh when I say this, they're very toy-like when they've got the generic paint and decals that, or the liveries that they come with from Matchbox, Corgi, Hot Wheels and all the rest of it. But once you take it all off, they do look really good little replicas. So I'm going to enjoy doing this one. I'm going to start by opening up these areas then that I can make some good little apertures on. So we'll start with the side. I was going to drill this with my big pillar drill, but well, two reasons really. It is a little bit big and cumbersome, I can't quite get in there, but you need it to be really slow. So the little hand drill is just fine enough to get me started and get this little jeweler's file on the go. A jeweler's saw, should I say. But once you've got that hole in, once you've fed the little saw blade through, you can begin slowly hacking away at it and starting to open it up quite nicely. It does take a lot of time, and to be honest, this one took the best part of 4 hours to do all these opening up, and I went through loads and loads of blades. I even snapped a couple of little files, so it was quite a tedious little process, I'll be brutally honest with this, especially with these little files. Going back into, you've only got an envelope of a few millimeters on, especially on the rear where you're touching other parts like the body post on the inside. So going back into and going over and over and over these little bits, your fingers start to hurt, your arms start to ache, your eyes ache. So it was a long drawn out process, I'll be brutally honest, but nevertheless it opens up quite nice, and overall I'm quite pleased with how especially the sides started to take shape. It's a fine balance. You can either open them up too much and spoil the casting, or not open them up enough and it looks a bit of a half-arsed attempt really. But these are the type of files I use, and I'll put some links in the description, some of these little modelling files. And there's lots of different shapes because you do need some of the sharp edges to get right into the corner. And again, on the curves, it's best to use a round or a curved file, so you don't just stick to one flat one basically. But I'll crack on and do this front openings where the lights, the intakes, etc. go, and especially on this rear. And this is the bit that really took the most time actually, because it's so fine to get in and out. I will jump those hours and not bore you any more than I should do, but you can just about see on the right the finished piece, and on the left it's just got some of the holes. Here's a better view, some of the holes still where I've got to open that one up, but there really isn't. There's only just enough room for the file itself width-wise to get in, so it did take some time going back and too. So here you can see just sort of the gap that you've got. It does make a big difference though. It does look rather good once it's finished, and it does open up my eyes to all these other little castings that I've got knocking around, the BMW E3s, M3s even, not E3, I think E33, is it E30s or something like that, but a little bit of patience and time, and here is the finished piece. It's just a few little scratches or scrapes here and there that I've sort of done as we've gone along, because again, trying to get that blade into some of those funny angles, you will inevitably catch some of the other parts of the car as you're going along. It's part of the process, sadly, being so fiddly, but I'll get on to doing sort of tidying up the rest of the body now, because there's these little areas where the seams are, where it's from the manufacturing process basically, where they've either joined it in the mould or put two pieces together, or however they did it back then. But I'll start with using these little sanding sticks, and these are really good. They've got sort of a foam core. Well, no, it's got a solid core with sort of foam outer edges before the sand. It's hard to explain, so I'll just quickly show you here. If I go slow, you can sort of see how it bends and forms to the contour that you want. So they're really good actually. It's better than, I find anyway, better than using a sort of a rigid file or even, you know, a sanding board, because you can still can't get into the curved areas like you do on this. But here's, once you've given it a good flat back, and it wasn't that long to do this bit, in all fairness, probably 3 or 4 minutes just going back and forth like that. They are quite soft, the die casts, to be honest, but once you've primed it up and painted it up, obviously the scratching will go away. So on now to the big job. It wasn't until I was taking it apart I found out that the chassis was split, so not that it's a surprise. I don't mind making these little chassis at all. So all in all, it's just another bit of a process going along. So I'll start by going round and just drawing the basic shape. I have actually done another standalone video on making interiors and making chassis, so again I'll put that in the description and have a look, but it's a bit more in depth than I'm showing you here. But once I've drawn around it, I'll straighten up some of the edges again, just to make sure it's all in line proportionally, left to right, front to back, etc., and keep offering it up as well to the overall original chassis, just to make sure we're still there. And once we've taken a time to slice round it, taking great care not to go inboard or cut your fingers for that matter, you've come up with a little replica chassis. And once you've sanded it down, just to round off some of the edges, take off some of the little burrs and whatnot, you'll be finished with a good sturdier platform. And it's actually 1.5 mil, which is pretty much the same as the original chassis. Yes, they've got some little ribbing and bridged parts in the original piece to replicate some of the underneath of it, which probably strengthens it a little bit more, I would imagine. Once I start adding bits to it in a short while, we'll get the same amount of strength back into it. But the finished item, I'm just going to show you the wheels I'm going to use. I'll put the link again in the description. I keep finding some great suppliers of these wheels, and this is somebody else through Instagram, PNW Diecast Customs. He does a great range of wheels, and he's forever doing new designs every, wow, 2 or 3 times a week, to be honest, but they're really good. I've got a selection of a few now. Superb quality, deep dished on the rear. You get about 4 sets every time you order one, so it's worthwhile doing. But all I've done is simply sprayed them silver from the original 3D printed state, resin, ABS, whatever it is that they come in. So to make the axles, I'm going to use a little bit of a styrene trick I've used on other cars, and I'll just use a little shallow C-section as a platform, because once I put the tube down, obviously this just spreads that load a little bit better going up the sides of the tube rather than just leaving it raw against the chassis, one for a better word. You could put loads and loads of super glue and blob a load of mess around it, but even though you can't see it, I'd rather be a little bit more careful. I know it's under there, that's all that matters. So here I'm doing is just putting that little piece down, getting the tube that I need. I'm using 2mm tube, and I think the inner wall is about 1mm. I think it's like 1/2 mm wall all the way around, I think. But as quick as I've done it, just offer it up to the places that you want to do it. Cut it to length, and then whack a bit of this mech on it to seal the deal. And miraculously, the front one's done at the same time. Who'd have thought it? But there you go, there's just how I plan on doing it. And I'll use some of the original axle pins from the car. I'll tidy them up a little bit because they are a little bit fuzzy, so I can just sand them down a bit and just give it a little bit more bling. But I'm simply just cutting them in half, and I'm doing it this way because it's already got the nipple or whatever on the end, the flat end, so it'll go nicely over the wheel already without doing anything over the top or fancy. And I'll simply just dab a little bit of glue on the outer of the pin and slip it into the tube, thus making a nicely stanced chassis this time. I know a few people have sort of not liked the way I've stanced some of my cars, or not stanced them, should I, more to the point, but I do like to make sure mine roll a bit, and with the rubber tyres, only a little bit of touch on the inside of the arch, and there's not a lot to play with when you're trying to round them back and file them down. They catch and they stall and they seize up and all the rest of it, so that's just my excuse for not stancing them. But here we go, this one's a little bit better. So just making sure it all fits nice and neat before I go any further. And there we have, already starting to look good. And I do like them in the natural state. I think they should do a range of cars actually, just in natural primed states and what have you. But onto the interior. Throw the old one away, we do not need that, but we will make use of another superb edition 6 bucket seat. Again, the description will have the link to the fine gentleman where I get these from. Very good. But I'll go through my little styrene drawer of offcuts before I start attempting to get into anything new. And I haven't done for a number of years now, but it's great, the scale for doing that. But what I want to do is make the whole of it, really. I'm not going to cut up like I've done on some of the other ones the dashboard or seats or whatever from the older interiors. I'm just going to go straight away and make a whole new one, but I'll just keep the other one there just for reference, for proportions and whatnot. So I'll start by making sort of the dashboard assembly. And the good thing about these silhouette cars, they were all bespokely made anyway, the insides of them, so they didn't really conform to any road going car anyway, so it's not too bad. I'm just using this little miter saw box because this stuff is a little bit thick, so rather than use my chopping board on this one, which throws it out a little bit, much neater cut by just sawing it this way. And a lot of this will be hidden anyway when I put the body of the car back on, so a lot of this also is for sort of holding the body to the chassis or giving it that clearance or whatever. So just going to fly around it and detail it up, cut a few little pieces off, stick them on there. Got to make some little buttons out of some 1/2 mil section and slowly put them on. I had a few goes at this because even light breathing or even a sneeze sends this stuff absolutely everywhere. So this is probably my second or third attempt at just trying to get these buttons from not disappearing out of eyesight. And a little bit of this mech again on it, just a whisper of it on is enough to keep it in situ. And another little healthy blob like that, and it's all done and dusted and sealed. So as I say, I've done a more in-depth video on doing this procedure, but this is just a quick flick through of me doing it for this car. And I've got an over part from another Chrome Bandits when I did some wheel discs and what have you, and it came with a steering wheel, so some of these parts are left over, carried over from another project that I did. But metal etch parts, really good, really accurate, really precise. Got to be careful because they are so thin that, you know, trying to twist them off can have them bent. So this is how fiddly they are, so I'll just pick it up and just show you there. But that's the size of the finesse of the steering wheel that I'm going to use. And here we have a little dash assembly with a few little gauges in there, a few buttons. I've just got that other little piece underneath it just to bolster it up a little bit so it sits nice and flush when the body's put back on it, like so. As always, just a quick offering up just to make sure it all sits and the clearances are okay. You can just about see inside and sort of how we're making headway with that one. So I'll whiz through and just put a little bit more around the rear just to make sort of where the engine bay was going to sit in the rear. Some of the rear wheel wells, although technically we didn't really have any wheel wells on these. It was the big air intakes and ducts that went in and fed all the air to the engine bay, but nevertheless it did have a big rear bulkhead. So I'm just putting some of this together, both left and right, and then I'll put the rear bulkheady bit in like that. Make sure it all lines up, sits okay. So just put a little tunnel. Well, it's not technically a tunnel because it was rear wheel drive, but they did have sort of center mounts to mount all the gear shifters and electronics and all the rest of it, and pipework to the back. So I've just replicated that again. And then also the lever that goes from the shifter, you can just about see it there. I'll show you a little bit better on the finished item. And some little vents or replica vents I'm just piecing on the top of this engine cover. type area. But on to doing the roll bar, just a few little mounting points. Make this a lot easier. Sometimes I drill the chassis itself, sometimes I put these little mounting points on, and with this one I've decided to do that because I wanted to try this other new material again. It's a floral wire which bends really easy, ironically making it easier than using styrene without snapping. But unfortunately, when you come to solder it, being that slightly bit thicker than paper clips, is a bit of a pain when it comes to getting them to stick together. But I'm just going to use this little magnetic jig. I'll put a link in the description. I've used this in the past and people have asked where to get it from. I've got it from Micromark in the States. Really good. You can pretty much put these little pieces anywhere, sandwich parts between them, lean them up against them. Holds it really good. Even on tight little fiddly things like this. So I'll just show you what I mean about how much of a pain this is. The paper clips, I think for me now, are by far the best thing to use. The bend is a little bit stiffer than this, but a bit less hassle than trying to melt and bend the styrene. But it's this process, when you come to solder it together, it's absolutely brilliant. This stuff, you've got to get all the heat into it, and it's about 450 degrees now, and it's just so hard trying to heat up and get some into that area and getting it to stick. So inevitably it comes out like bird shit. It's quite blobby here, there and everywhere, so it'll take some filing to get down. No big deal, but I think now I've got the world's supply of floral wire, I'm going to have to set up a website, floralwire.com, just to get rid of the damn stuff now. So I don't know if anybody wants some, you know, come to me. I've got half the world's supply of it. I really have. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, strong as hell, don't get me wrong. But yeah, coming to actually solder the stuff together, it's rubbish. But I'll either get back to styrene cages or I'll crack on with the paper clips. But here I am, just trying to sand down, file down even these areas, just to make it more palatable and visually acceptable. But here we have a finished item. The seat does sit a little bit proud at the moment because I've got some blue tack underneath it just to keep it in place while I was doing all this, because I want that separate on this one, which I'll show you in a second. But quick flick all over with white primer. You're all familiar with that from past videos. The base of this is going to be white, so again, quick lick over with white on the main body, but a little bit of detail painting here and there all round, and all is good. So I'm going to do the Apple Computers livery on this. It was a hard choice because I've that many to go at, but for now I'll just do a quick plug from when I last announced, or when I last did my last video of all the decals that I'm doing. So I've done a new range. I've done generic sheets for oil companies. I've done JPS ones, some Fruit of the Looms, Ferraris, a few more Skylines, Marlboro, Lucky Strike. And again, you can click on them, give you some rough dimensions of the products that I've done and a few overviews of the shots, so you've got them offered up to the car so you know roughly the sizes. So please take a look. And yeah, I've had an overwhelming response. They've gone all around the world so far in my first month. Absolutely chuffed to bits, but I keep adding all the times. The new ones will appear at the top. Just go and check it out. Thanks very much. So getting quickly back onto it. No harm with some self-divulgence there. So to quickly get back to it, here is the Apple livery car. I tend to use a little brush just to offer them around in places. They are very tough wearing now, so I've yet to have any decal in all the years I've been making them, and even using other ones from, you know, from the kits themselves. I've never had one tear on me, so cheating fate in saying that, but I tend to use a brush rather than a cotton bud or something. But Here is the bucket seat then. I've used some masking tape again on this one, just painted with some matte paint, some XF Tamiya flat paint, just to give it a bit of texture rather than anything glossy, so it does look a little bit more material-like. A bit better than when I was using the vinyl stickers because they were so rigid and they'd flicked out of place. The masking tape obviously bends and conforms and gets around the contours a lot better, so overall I think it is a little bit of a better job using this sort of stuff. So that is the finished seat, and now the whole finished interior. So we've just coloured the buttons on the dash there and the dials. We've got the centre gear changer with a little bar going to the rear, but that is basically how we have got our own chassis. Apart from the wheels and the seats, everything else is self-made. So let's have a quick look. I haven't used the original car because I had a fairly decent looking original car, so I can make this comparison a little bit easier. So here it is, this sash version. Looks sort of out of proportion a little bit with these little wheels on it and stuff, but nevertheless it was a good looking casting. The other one was slightly a bit more battered, but here is my take on the Apple Computer livery version. There's the openings there. I've just put a little bit of speaker mesh behind it. Redone the windscreens, which I've shown in other videos, out of some see-through styrene from Evergreens scale models. The great wheels from PNW Diecast Customs, which I'll put in the description. Here's a bit more of a close-up. You can just about see inside there some of the detailing and the roll bar. There's the wheels. Nice, vibrant Apple livery. You can make out the screens, front and rear. Some little exhaust tips on there, and now the cutaway parts, and I'll just show you side by side how it looked against the original casting there with the parts that have now been opened up. Putting the glass that I do into them, I think it gives it a little bit more scale, realism as well, so they're the thickness of the original ones. There's the rear there with the openings now, which took me all night practically, but there is my version of the 935 Porsche Racer, which I hope you all like. I will add these decals now to the store, so not only just for this car, I've done a generic set as well, so the logos, the stripes, the wording, if you want to put it on another car. Thanks as always for watching, I really appreciate it. All the best till next time.